A camera trap blinks on somewhere in the Florida Everglades. A 12-foot Burmese python moves through sawgrass, slow and certain, the way apex predators move when nothing hunts them. Then something pulls it downward, fast, and the frame goes still. That footage spread across wildlife forums, news feeds, and social media within days. Millions watched it. Almost nobody stopped to ask whether it was real. That was late 2023. By early 2024, the clip had been reposted by dozens of verified accounts, cited in comment threads as proof of a mysterious underground predator, and viewed more than 40 million times across platforms. Here is what you need to know before we go any further. The Everglades hold somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 Burmese pythons right now. Real field scientists work that ecosystem every single day under brutal, unglamorous conditions. And not one of them filmed what that video claims to show. This episode is about what the footage actually is and what it tells us about how fast a single image can outrun the truth. The Everglades covers roughly 6,000 square kilometres of subtropical wetland in South Florida, and it is one of the most biologically dense ecosystems in North America. 68 threatened species live here. Wading bird populations have crashed by around 90% since the 1930s. The water moves slowly, the heat is relentless, and the work of understanding this place never really stops. Burmese pythons were first documented with a confirmed breeding population here in the early 2000s. The leading theory is released or escaped pets. What followed is one of the most severe mammal collapses ever recorded in a North American ecosystem. Raccoon, opossum, and rabbit populations, down 85 to 99% in the python's core range. Those numbers come from peer-reviewed field surveys conducted over years by researchers who wade into this water before sunrise and stay until after dark. They carry handheld GPS units and waterproof data sheets. They work in pairs because the terrain demands it. The science they produce is slow, expensive, and irreplaceable. That context matters enormously for what comes next, because when a video surfaces claiming something is dragging pythons underground at night, something unidentified, something powerful enough to take a 12-foot snake in seconds, people want it to be true. The Everglades feels wild enough, strange enough, to make it believable. And that feeling is exactly what misinformation exploits. The real scientists studying this ecosystem deserve better than that. So does the ecosystem itself. What actually lives in that water, what actually threatens those pythons, and what that footage actually shows, that is what we are here to find out. It was 2026, and a camera trap mounted to a cypress knee deep in the Everglades was recording something nobody could immediately explain. That is where this story begins. Not in a laboratory, not in a press release, not in the comment section of a viral video, but out in the sawgrass and black water, where the real Everglades does its quiet, ancient work. The claim that spread across wildlife forums, nature channels, and social media in the late summer of 2026 started with footage. Grainy, nighttime infrared footage of a Burmese python, one of the largest invasive predators on the continent, being pulled, dragged, disappearing into the earth. The video circulated fast. Within days, it had accumulated millions of views, and the reason it spread so quickly is not hard to understand. The Burmese python has been one of the most documented ecological disasters in American conservation history. These snakes arrived through the pet trade, and by the time wildlife managers fully grasped what was happening, the population had already embedded itself into the Everglades in a way that made eradication essentially impossible. Estimates from the United States Geological Survey have placed the Florida python population somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 animals. That range alone tells you something. The snakes are so secretive, so perfectly camouflaged against the tangle of roots and water and shadow, that even counting them accurately is a scientific challenge. So when footage appeared suggesting that something out there in the dark was hunting them, the reaction was immediate and electric. People wanted it to be true, desperately. The video, as it circulated across platforms in July and August of 2026, came packaged with a detailed and authoritative-sounding narrative. This was not raw footage dumped online with a question mark. It was framed, explained, sourced. The accompanying text described camera traps deployed across a remote section of the Everglades, capturing repeated incidents over several weeks, in which Burmese pythons were dragged underground at night by what the narration called an unidentified force or predator. The language was careful enough to avoid naming a specific predator, which, if you think about it, is actually a clever rhetorical move. Saying you do not know what it is sounds more scientific than making something up. It leaves the door open. It invites speculation while technically committing to nothing. If that sounds bad, keep watching. The footage was attributed to the Florida Wildlife Institute, described as a research body conducting long-term ecological monitoring in the Greater Everglades watershed. 2 scientists were named as the leads. Dr. Emily Carter, identified as lead herpetologist at the Florida Wildlife Institute, and Dr. Michael Torres, described as a python ecologist at the same institution. The post cited 2 publications as scientific backbone. The first was the Florida Wildlife Institute Field Report, dated August 2026. The second was the Journal of Invasive Species Research, Volume 12, Issue 4, also 2026, described as containing peer-reviewed analysis of the footage and its implications. And then came the detail that gave the whole thing a veneer of institutional legitimacy. A press release, dated the 24th of August 2026, supposedly issued by the University of Florida Herpetology Lab, was referenced as having confirmed the footage. Not just noted it, confirmed it. The word confirmed does a lot of heavy lifting in science communication, and whoever wrote this framing knew that. The story was seductive precisely because it mapped onto something real scientists have genuinely wondered about. Is there any natural predator in the Everglades capable of putting meaningful pressure on the python population? American alligators have been documented killing pythons, and there are extraordinary photographs of those encounters. 2 apex predators locked in a contest that looks prehistoric, because in many ways it is. Alligators have been around, in forms recognizable to us, for roughly 37 million years. But even the alligator does not appear to be suppressing python numbers in any measurable way. The idea of something else, something unidentified, something that hunts at night and pulls these massive snakes underground, scratches at a very deep itch. It suggests the ecosystem might have a hidden answer to its own crisis. It suggests nature fighting back. Dr. Emily Carter was reported to have said that the repeated nature of the incidents across multiple camera sites suggested coordinated predation behavior rather than opportunistic attack. Dr. Michael Torres was quoted describing the footage as unlike anything documented in 20 years of python field research. These quotes were specific. They had the texture of expertise. The story framed the whole discovery as a potential natural check on the invasion. The first credible evidence, it claimed, that something in the Everglades food web had adapted to treat the Burmese python not as an apex predator, but as prey. The clock was already ticking. The story just couldn't hear it yet. That framing tells you something about how the claim was engineered to travel. It did not ask you to be afraid. It asked you to be hopeful. And hope, it turns out, is just as powerful an accelerant for misinformation as fear. Maybe more powerful, because hope lowers your guard. You want to share good news. You want the ecosystem to have a fighting chance, so you hit the button before you ask the obvious questions. For a while, things actually seemed fine. The comments were full of people tagging wildlife biologists and conservation pages genuinely excited. That didn't last. Picture a wildlife biologist sitting at a desk late in the evening, opening a browser tab because someone has sent them the viral video with a message that just says, "Have you seen this? Is it real? That is probably how it started for more than a few people with actual scientific training, because the claims were specific enough that you could check them. And when you are a researcher, when you have spent years learning how to navigate academic databases and institutional directories and peer-reviewed literature, checking a specific claim takes about 4 minutes. The first thing you would do is look up the Florida Wildlife Institute, any legitimate research institution conducting fieldwork in the Everglades leaves a trail. It has a verifiable address. It has a publicly accessible staff directory because accountability is part of how scientific institutions maintain credibility. It files reports with state and federal wildlife agencies. It publishes output that other researchers can cite and build on. It shows up in grant databases, in collaborative agreements, in the footnotes of other people's papers. The Florida Wildlife Institute, as cited in the viral video, does not appear to exist in any of those ways. There is no verifiable institutional address, no staff directory, no record of peer-reviewed output in any major academic database. A search through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's list of recognized research partners turns up nothing. A search through Everglades National Park's documented research affiliates turns up nothing. The institution appears to have been invented for the purpose of lending authority to this specific claim. Think about that for a second. Someone did not just fabricate footage and call it a day. They built an entire institutional wrapper around it. They gave the institution a plausible name, one that sounds like it belongs in the same sentence as the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. They gave it a research focus that matched the subject matter. And then they populated it with named scientists, because a named scientist is far more convincing than a vague reference to researchers. Dr. Emily Carter, lead herpetologist at the Florida Wildlife Institute. That name does not appear in the University of Florida's faculty or research staff listings. It does not appear in the Herpetologists League membership database. It does not appear in any conference proceedings from the Society for the Study of Amphibians and Reptiles, one of the primary professional bodies in the field. There is no Dr. Emily Carter in this professional world who matches these credentials, this institution, or this area of research. Dr. Michael Torres, python ecologist, produces the same result. No faculty listing. No published papers indexed in Web of Science or Google Scholar under that name and that field. No conference presentations. No field reports filed with any state or federal agency. No record of collaboration with any of the real researchers who have spent careers working on the Burmese python problem. People like Dr. Frank Mazzotti at the University of Florida, or the teams at the USGS Wetland and Aquatic Research Center. Dr. Michael Torres, as described in the viral video, simply does not exist in the scientific record. That was only round one. Because once the named scientists dissolve under scrutiny, you turn to the publications. The Florida Wildlife Institute Field Report, August 2026, cannot be located through any institutional repository, any state archive, or any database that indexes grey literature and technical reports. The Journal of Invasive Species Research, Volume 12, Issue 4, 2026, a journal that does exist and does publish legitimate science, contains no such paper in that issue. No paper matching the described findings, no paper authored by Carter or Torres, no paper referencing camera trap footage of python predation events of this nature. And the University of Florida Herpetology Lab press release, dated the 24th of August 2026. The university's press release archive, which is publicly searchable, contains no such document. The Herpetology Lab itself had no record of issuing any statement related to this footage. The architecture of the claim is elaborate. This is not a blurry photograph with a caption that says, "Monster spotted in swamp." This is a constructed edifice, named researchers, named institutions, named publications, a dated press release from a real university department, Every element is designed to make the next element more believable. The institution validates the scientists. The scientists validate the footage. The publications validate the science. The press release ties a bow on it. Fabricated expert names attached to fabricated institutions are a documented pattern in AI-generated science content and in clickbait operations that have learned to mimic scientific communication. The tell, almost always, is that the names exist nowhere outside the claim itself. Real scientists leave trails. They publish, they collaborate, they attend conferences, they argue with each other in the literature. The scientific community is a traceable network, and Dr. Emily Carter and Dr. Michael Torres are not in that network at any node. Which brings us to the footage itself, because even if you accept that the names are fabricated and the institutions are invented, the footage still exists. People watched it. They described the movement of the snake as unmistakable. So what exactly are we looking at when we watch those few seconds of infrared video from the dark edge of the Everglades? The same footage that built the story's viral success was about to destroy it. There is a particular kind of silence that settles over the sawgrass in the hours before dawn. The water is black and perfectly still. Even the frogs go quiet for a stretch, as if the marsh itself is holding its breath. It is in moments like this that the Everglades feels genuinely ancient, a place that has been sorting out its own rules for 10,000 years without anyone's help. And it is in moments like this that a claim about something new, something unidentified, something filmed in secret, feels most seductive. Because the dark does that. It makes you want to believe. The video came packaged with 4 sources. That is worth saying clearly, because a claim dressed in citations looks different from a claim that arrives naked. This one arrived wearing a suit. And the real question is what happened when anyone actually tried to find them. The first was listed as the Journal of Invasive Species Research, Volume 12, Issue 4, published in 2026. That sounds right. Invasive species research is a real and active field with legitimate peer-reviewed journals. So a researcher or a curious viewer would go looking, PubMed, Web of Science, Google Scholar. Volume 12, Issue 4 of that journal does not appear in any of those databases. Not indexed, not archived, not referenced by any other paper. It does not exist in any repository that legitimate peer-reviewed science leaves behind. The second source was called the X-Force Project Documentation Release, dated August 2026. No organizational parent, no DOI, no institutional address, no press record of any kind. Whoever constructed this citation gave it a release date, a month, a year, the texture of an official document drop. But a document without a home is not a source. It is a prop. Real scientific releases, even internal agency reports that never see a journal, come attached to something verifiable, a filing number, a program office, a named contracting agency. This had none of those things. The third was attributed to the National Geographic Wildlife Filming Database Update, also August 2026. National Geographic is a real institution with a long and serious history in wildlife documentation. Their name carries weight, and that weight is precisely why it was borrowed here. But National Geographic has no such database product. Their press office has no record of any such update. The citation circulated across comment sections and reshare threads as if it were solid ground, and nobody stopped to push on it. The fourth was the most specific. It was listed as the Everglades National Park Camera Trap Study, July through August 2026. Camera trap studies in Everglades National Park are real. The National Park Service and the United States Geological Survey run legitimate Python monitoring programs with actual field teams, actual hardware, and publicly archived results. Researchers in those programs spend weeks at a time in the field, checking trap stations before sunrise, downloading footage onto ruggedized laptops in the back of mud-caked trucks, logging every animal detected and every camera malfunction into standardized databases. The NPS has no record of this particular study, no record of its design, its deployment, its release, or its existence. USGS has no record of it either. Here is what genuine scientific publication looks like in practice. It leaves a paper trail the way a large animal leaves tracks in soft mud. There is a DOI, a permanent address that resolves to the actual paper. There is an institutional repository. There is a press office that fielded calls when the findings were announced. There are co-authors with faculty pages or agency profiles. There are citing papers that came after. When you pull on any one of those threads, it leads somewhere real. When you pull on the threads attached to these 4 sources, your hand comes back empty. The Everglades has its own version of this problem actually. For decades, the python population spread quietly through the park before the science caught up to what local hunters and airboat guides already knew. When researchers finally began systematic removal and tracking programs in the late 2010s, those efforts generated exactly the kind of record that real science generates. Tagged animals, GPS relocation data, peer-reviewed population estimates, publicly accessible datasets. Roughly 960 animals removed across a single coordinated effort spanning more than 10,000 square kilometres. Numbers that came from somewhere. Numbers you could trace. The sources attached to this viral claim could not be traced. They were designed to look like the end of a trail, not the beginning of one. And that design, that careful mimicry of the shape of evidence without any of its substance, is not an accident. It is a choice. One researcher who studies misinformation in wildlife media noted that fabricated citations in viral nature content have become more sophisticated over the past several years. The journal names sound plausible, the volume numbers are realistic. The institutional affiliations are chosen for their credibility by association. The goal is not to survive scrutiny. The goal is to survive long enough that scrutiny never arrives. She said, paraphrasing closely, that the most dangerous fake citation is the one that sounds so reasonable that no one bothers to check. She said it plainly. She said it publicly. Nobody listened. And if the sources were constructed, if the paper trail was painted on rather than walked into existence, then the footage itself was carrying the entire weight of the claim. Every view, every share, every person who said "I can't explain this" was responding to those few seconds of infrared video. Which means the footage was never just evidence. It was the only thing holding the story up. And it was about to be examined very closely. Go back to that opening image for a moment. Something moving in the dark. Something large, something purposeful. Something that seemed to defy what we thought we knew about how pythons behave. That image did what the best wildlife footage always does. It made you feel the weight of your own ignorance. It reminded you that the natural world is not finished surprising us. That feeling is real. The Everglades genuinely holds things we do not fully understand. The python invasion has reshaped predator-prey dynamics in ways researchers are still mapping. There is legitimate mystery out there in the sawgrass and the black water, but the footage itself does not hold up. No original camera trap file was ever released. No metadata. No GPS stamp. No chain of custody documentation showing where the hardware was deployed, who retrieved it, or when. Legitimate footage from NPS and USGS Python research programs is publicly archived and freely accessible. Researchers can download it, cite it, and replicate the analysis. This footage had no such lineage. It arrived fully formed, with no verifiable origin point, no file provenance, and no institutional custodian willing to produce the raw data behind it. The clips that circulated show compression artifacts inconsistent with standard wildlife camera hardware. The lighting shifts in ways that do not match the thermal signature of a single stationary unit running through a night cycle. Frame-by-frame analysis, reveals edges that blur and reconstitute in patterns more consistent with compositing than with genuine low-light infrared capture. These are not dramatic smoking gun revelations. They are quiet technical details, the kind that accumulate slowly in the hands of someone who has spent years reviewing authentic field footage until they reach a single, unavoidable conclusion. And then there is the behaviour itself. Burmese pythons are among the most thoroughly documented invasive species on the continent. They are ambush predators. They do not burrow. They do not excavate shelters. They do not drag large prey underground. No known Florida predator, not the alligator, not the Florida panther, not the black bear, behaves this way either. The animal in the footage was doing something that nothing in the Everglades actually does. The video gave us the feeling of discovery without any of its substance. And that feeling, borrowed and unearned, travelled faster than any correction ever will. We didn't find a new predator. We found a very convincing shadow. And the Everglades, indifferent as always, kept its real secrets exactly where it left them. What people remember is the shadow, not the correction. If that unsettles you, share this with someone who needs to see it.